September 10, 1944. Branville, France. A coastal villa perched high on a cliff above the Atlantic serves as the headquarters of the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. Inside, General Dwight D. Eisenhower leans over a large table buried beneath logistics charts and operational maps. Standing close beside him is his Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Walter Bedell Smith. The coffee on the table has long since gone cold. The maps themselves tell a grim, unforgiving story. Patton's Third Army is stalled in the rain, its tanks dry and waiting. Hodges' First Army is rationing gasoline in Belgium, barely able to keep moving. Every red line stretching across the map marks a supply convoy fighting to keep pace with Allied forces that burst out of Normandy and swept across France far faster than planners ever anticipated. The advance has outrun the logistics meant to sustain it. Then the telephone rings. Smith answers and listens in silence. His expression tightens. He covers the receiver and looks at Eisenhower. "Sir, it's Field Marshal Montgomery." Eisenhower takes the phone. "Monty, what can I do for you?" What he hears causes his grip on the receiver to tighten. Smith watches Eisenhower's jaw harden, watches him close his eyes briefly, as if steadying himself. When Eisenhower speaks again, his voice is controlled, deliberate. "Say that again, please." Montgomery repeats himself. Britain's most celebrated general, the victor of El Alamein, the man who shattered Rommel's reputation, has just delivered an ultimatum to the Supreme Commander of Allied forces in Europe. He demands 100% of Allied supplies. Everything currently flowing to the front is to be diverted entirely to the 21st Army Group. If not, he will resign. Eisenhower's face drains of color. If you want to understand how a single phone call nearly shattered the Allied coalition and altered the course of World War II, hit subscribe now and ring the bell for WW2 War Files. We bring you the untold stories, the real conversations, and the moments that decided history. Let's go. Eisenhower places Montgomery on hold and turns to Smith. His voice is low, but there is iron beneath it. "Bedell, tell me I didn't imagine that. Monty just said he wants us to completely ground Patton and Hodges." Smith nods. "Yes, sir. He said all operations not under 21st Army Group Command must halt." Eisenhower pulls the logistics map closer. The numbers are brutally clear. Red Ball Express trucks run nonstop from the Normandy beaches to the front, a 400-mile round trip, day and night. Under the current allocation, Patton's Third Army receives 400 tons of supplies per day. Hodges' First Army receives 400 tons as well. Montgomery's 21st Army Group already receives 750 tons daily, more than any other command. Montgomery isn't asking for an increase. He's demanding that Eisenhower shut down two entire American armies now barely 60 miles from the German border, and redirect their entire supply allotment exclusively to him. That's 800 additional tons from the Americans, on top of his existing 750. Over 1,200 tons per day to a single army group. Eisenhower works the numbers aloud. Total Allied supply capacity from the Normandy ports is about 1,500 tons a day. Monty wants 1,200 of it. He looks up at Smith. That leaves 300 tons for Patton, Hodges, Paris, which needs 300 tons just to feed civilians. There is a 6th Army Group in the South and the maintenance of the entire supply system. He shakes his head. That's not a supply plan. That's shutting down 3/4 of the front. Smith keeps his tone neutral. "Sir, he believes concentrating everything on one thrust into Germany could end the war by Christmas. And if it fails?" Eisenhower's voice rises slightly. "Then we've got 3 immobilized armies, a 200-mile exposed flank, and the Germans free to concentrate against a single axis. This is..." He stops, exhales, then lifts the phone again. "Monty, I need to be absolutely clear. You're asking me to completely halt the 3rd and 1st Armies and give you their supplies for one operation into Germany." Montgomery's voice comes through the line, sharp and clipped in its British cadence. "Not asking, Ike. Telling you what's required. We have a chance to end this war before winter. One decisive blow, while the Germans are disorganized, but only if we have the courage to take it. We've discussed this already. The broad front strategy isn't just my personal preference, Eisenhower replies. It's Allied policy, agreed upon by the combined chiefs. We advance on multiple axes, keep pressure along the entire German front. Those directives were written before we broke out of Normandy, and they still stand. The situation has changed, Montgomery counters. My intelligence indicates the Germans are beaten. One strong thrust can reach Berlin before they recover, but I need the supplies. All of them. Now. Eisenhower's voice hardens. And if your single thrust fails, what do I tell Bradley? What do I tell Patton? That their men sat idle while one army group received everything? That's more dangerous than a slower advance that denies Hitler the chance to rebuild. Montgomery's tone sharpens. This is about winning the war, not about keeping everyone satisfied. A long silence stretches between them. Eisenhower closes his eyes. Monty, I can't do it. I won't halt 3 American armies for one operation. This is a coalition war. Montgomery's voice turns cold, formal. Then I regret to inform you, Ike, that if you will not concentrate resources for a decisive victory, I will have no alternative but to submit my resignation to the Prime Minister. The silence afterward is absolute. Smith watches Eisenhower's knuckles whiten around the phone. You're serious? Eisenhower says quietly, dangerously, I'll call you back. He hangs up and stands motionless for a moment before turning to Smith. Get Bradley on the line, then get Marshal in Washington. This just became a political crisis. Montgomery was not bluffing. He had already drafted his resignation letter and was preparing to take the issue directly to Winston Churchill. Within 2 hours, his cable reaches London. He bypasses the British Chiefs of Staff and goes straight to number 10, Downing Street. The message is polite, diplomatic, but unmistakable. Eisenhower's broad front strategy, it claims, is squandering the victory Montgomery achieved in Normandy. A concentrated thrust could end the war in weeks, but American caution stands in the way. Churchill reads the message in his office. His private secretary, John Colville, later records a reaction in his diary. The Prime Minister set the cable down and said, Monty has just lit a powder keg. By afternoon, British newspapers, fed by leaks from Montgomery's circle, begin questioning American leadership. The headlines avoid naming Eisenhower directly, but the implication is obvious. Missed opportunities in France. An outdated strategy. A cautious crawl instead of decisive action. One editorial openly wonders whether excessive caution is giving Germany time to regroup. The political damage is immediate. 3,000 miles away, Eisenhower's urgent call reaches General George C. Marshall, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army. At the War Department in Washington, it is 9 in the morning. Marshall listens without interruption as Eisenhower explains everything. Montgomery's demand for total supply priority, the threat of resignation, the direct appeal to Churchill. Marshall's response is icy. If Montgomery resigns, let him. But if you yield to this kind of pressure, you'll face open revolt from every American general in theater. Patton will go public. Bradley will ask to be relieved. Ike, the coalition will come apart. There's a pause. Then Marshall's voice grows even harder. If you decide Montgomery must be relieved of command, I will support you all the way to the president. But we will not allow British political pressure to dictate American operational sacrifice. Is that understood? Yes, sir. You have full authority. Use it. But Montgomery was not finished. He was preparing to propose something even more extraordinary, something that would force Eisenhower to contemplate the unthinkable. September 11th, 1944. The following morning, General Omar Bradley, commander of the 12th Army Group, which includes both Patton's 3rd Army and Hodges' 1st Army, arrives at Eisenhower's headquarters without warning, having driven to the night from his command post after hearing through staff channels about Montgomery's ultimatum. Bradley is usually calm, diplomatic, and endlessly patient, but not today. He walks straight into Eisenhower's office without ceremony. "Ike, if you ground the First and Third Armies to feed Monty's ego, I'm asking for relief." Eisenhower looks up, startled. "Brad, I mean it." Bradley cuts in, his voice flat and final. "I will not tell Courtney Hodges that his men accomplished nothing while Montgomery marches to Berlin, and I sure as hell won't stand in front of George Patton and explain why his tanks are sitting empty so Montgomery can take credit for winning the war." Eisenhower tries to respond, but Bradley leans over the desk. "You choose Monty over us, I'm done, and you'll lose every American field commander you have. This isn't about supplies anymore. It's about who commands this army, you or Montgomery." Eisenhower meets his gaze. "I'm not giving Montgomery total supply priority." Bradley straightens slightly. "Then what are you giving him?" Eisenhower exhales. "I don't know yet. Churchill is flying in tomorrow. This is above our pay grade now." Bradley nods once. "Whatever you decide, Ike, remember this. Patton and I command 800,000 men. They fought from Normandy to the German border. If you ground them for Monty's theory about ending the war by Christmas, you'd better be damn sure it works. Because if it doesn't, we lose 2 months, 3 armies worth of momentum, and the confidence of every American soldier in Europe." He turns and walks out. Eisenhower remains alone, trapped between mounting political pressure from London, Marshall's warning not to break the American armies for British prestige, Bradley's threat to resign, and Montgomery still waiting with a resignation letter ready. In London, Churchill is already reading Montgomery's next cable, the one that will force him to fly to France in person. On September 12, 1944, a second memorandum arrives from Montgomery. Eisenhower opens it expecting another argument about supply allocations, but instead Montgomery now demands that Eisenhower appoint a single ground forces commander for all Allied armies in Northwest Europe, with full operational authority over Bradley, Patton, Hodges, everyone. And the memo strongly implies that this commander should be Montgomery himself. Eisenhower reads again, then a third time, and finally sets it down, staring at Smith. "He wants me to fire myself." Smith says nothing. This is no longer about fuel or trucks. Montgomery is proposing an outright revolution in the Allied command structure in the middle of an active campaign, asking Eisenhower to surrender direct control of the ground war and create a position that does not even exist, placing himself between the Supreme Commander and the armies. Within hours, British newspapers, still being fed information from Montgomery's staff, escalate their attacks, now openly calling for experienced battlefield leadership of ground operations. The implication is unmistakable. Eisenhower, who had never commanded troops in combat before this war, should step aside for the victor of El Alamein. Churchill cables Eisenhower, requesting an urgent meeting. The Prime Minister is caught between his most popular general and his most indispensable ally. If he backs Montgomery and Eisenhower refuses, Roosevelt may question Britain's commitment to coalition command. If he backs Eisenhower and Montgomery resigns, British public opinion could explode. Across the Channel, Patton learns of Montgomery's ground commander proposal through intelligence intercepts, and that night he writes in his diary, later published, "If Ike caves to that insufferable man and makes him ground commander, I'll resign and tell the press exactly why. I won't serve under Montgomery. I'd rather be a colonel under Bradley than a general under that pompous. The rest is unprintable." Even Montgomery's own staff officers begin to grow uneasy. One of them, Major General Francis de Guingand, Montgomery's chief of staff, will later write in his memoirs that he privately warned Montgomery, "Sir, this may be going too far," only to be brushed aside with a reminder that Eisenhower had Washington's backing. Eisenhower seeks a British perspective from his deputy, Air Chief Marshal Arthur Tedder. "Arthur, I'm the Supreme Commander." Eisenhower says, "Montgomery is trying to reorganize Allied command, so he stands between me and my armies. If I allow this, I'm not commanding anything. I'm just a politician in a chateau." Tedder, who has no affection for Montgomery, is blunt. He's overreached, Ike. But Churchill needs to understand that. At the same time in London, Churchill is having a parallel conversation with Field Marshal Alan Brooke, chief of the Imperial General Staff and Montgomery's strongest supporter. "Monty is brilliant," Churchill says, "but impossible. If we push this and Eisenhower resigns, Roosevelt will pull American support. We'll lose the war to save Montgomery's pride." Brooke, torn between loyalty and reality, can only answer, "Prime Minister, Monty believes he is right." Churchill replies quietly, "Believing you're right and being right are not the same thing." At Bradley's headquarters, Bradley and Patton meet in private. "George," Bradley says, "if Montgomery becomes ground commander, we're both asking for relief the same day." Patton snorts, "You write the letter. I'll call the press conference." Because Montgomery has just sent Eisenhower another message. And this time he isn't merely demanding supplies. On September 14, 1944, Winston Churchill's aircraft lands in France. The Prime Minister meets Eisenhower privately at SHAF headquarters. No aides, no transcripts. But what is decided in that room will shape the future of Allied command. That evening, Churchill cables the War Cabinet in London with the result. Eisenhower has his full support to maintain the command structure as it stands. But Churchill also asked for something in return. Can Eisenhower give Montgomery enough to attempt his northern operation? Something bold enough to satisfy British public opinion and show that the Allies are not simply grinding forward? Eisenhower sees the political solution clearly. He will approve Montgomery's proposed Operation Market Garden, the massive airborne assault into Holland. Montgomery will receive supply priority for that single operation. But there will be no permanent command changes and no total supply monopoly. It is a compromise. Montgomery gets his chance to prove his single thrust theory, but on a limited scale and on a clock. If it succeeds, his argument gains weight. If it fails, the broad front strategy continues without further challenge. Churchill agrees. It keeps Montgomery in the war and removes his grounds for resignation. After Churchill departs, Eisenhower sits alone in his office. The next morning he will call Montgomery and deliver the decision, a phone call that will either end the crisis or shatter the coalition completely. He picks up a pen and begins drafting notes for what he will say. It needs to be firm enough to end Montgomery's challenge, diplomatic enough to preserve the alliance, and clear enough that Montgomery would understand there would be no more ultimatums. The next morning, September 15th, 1944, Eisenhower places the call. Montgomery's aide answers. Field Marshal Montgomery's headquarters. "This is General Eisenhower. Put the Field Marshal on." 30 seconds later, Montgomery's voice comes through, crisp and formal. "Good morning, Ike." "Monty, I consulted with General Marshall and met with the Prime Minister yesterday. I'm calling to give you my decision." "I'm listening." Eisenhower's voice is measured, but there is steel beneath it. "You're not getting total supply priority. You're not getting a ground commander position. The command structure remains as it is. I command. You command 21st Army Group. Bradley commands 12th Army Group." There is silence on the line. When Montgomery speaks again, his voice is stiff. "Then I must maintain my position, Ike. Without concentration of resources, we're losing our opportunity to end this war. This is the moment." Eisenhower could back down, could offer another compromise, could allow political pressure to force his hand, but he does not. "Then I'll accept it." Another silence, longer this time. "But before you submit that letter to London, understand this." Eisenhower continues, his voice now colder. "General Marshall has authorized me to relieve you if necessary. The Prime Minister has indicated he will not oppose maintaining the current command arrangements. If you resign, I will appoint General Miles Dempsey to command 21st Army Group and continue operations." The silence that follows is absolute. On the other end of the line, Montgomery realizes the ground has shifted. He played his political card, and Eisenhower has just called a bluff. Churchill has sided with Eisenhower. When Montgomery speaks again, the certainty is gone. You would accept my resignation? Monty, you are one of the finest commanders in this war, but I'm not reorganizing Allied command under threat. I'm not halting 3 American armies for one operation, and I'm not allowing any subordinate, British or American, to dictate strategy through blackmail. Eisenhower pauses, letting the words settle. So yes, if you resign, I'll accept it. I'll relieve you with regret, and I'll continue the mission. 10 seconds of silence pass. Smith, standing beside Eisenhower, can hear his own heartbeat. Montgomery's voice returns, changed now, backing down. I see. Then perhaps I was too forceful in my memorandum. May I ask what you can offer for the northern operation? I still believe we have an opportunity in Holland. Eisenhower's voice softens slightly as he lays out the compromise. I'll approve Market Garden. I'll give you supply priority for that operation specifically, enough to support 3 airborne divisions and the advance of XXX Corps. But Patton and Hodges will continue their operations at reduced levels, and after Market Garden concludes, we return to balance logistics across the front. He pauses. That's my final offer, Monty. Another pause follows as Montgomery calculates. He has lost the battle for total control, but he is being offered one operation, one chance to prove his theory. It isn't everything he demanded, but it is something. Very well, Ike. I'll withdraw my resignation, and I'll make Market Garden succeed with what you can provide. This is the moment Eisenhower has been building toward, the line that defines the entire crisis. His voice is quiet, but absolutely firm. Monty, you're a great general, one of the greatest, but this is my command. It was given to me by Roosevelt, Churchill, and the combined chiefs of staff. You don't negotiate for it. You don't threaten for it. And you sure as hell don't resign your way into it. He lets the words hang for a moment. Now, are you going to command 21st Army Group? Or do I call General Dempsey? The silence is brief this time. I'll command, sir. Good. I'll have the operations order for Market Garden on your desk by this afternoon. We launch in 72 hours. Eisenhower hangs up and leans back in his chair. Smith stares at him. Sir, you just faced down the British Empire's most famous general. I just saved the alliance, Eisenhower replies. There's a difference. This had never been only about supplies or strategy. Montgomery, the victor of El Alamein, Britain's national hero, the general who broke Rommel in the desert, had tried to use his prestige and British political pressure to seize operational control from Eisenhower. He assumed the coalition would bend rather than lose him, that Churchill and Eisenhower would fold under pressure. He was wrong. Eisenhower called the bluff, backed by Marshall and ultimately by Churchill, and in doing so established an ironclad principle that would govern Allied operations for the rest of the war. Coalition unity under American command, not British prestige politics. Montgomery never threatened resignation again. 3 days later, he launched Market Garden with the supplies Eisenhower approved, and it failed catastrophically. On September 17, 1944, Operation Market Garden begins. 3 Allied airborne divisions, the American 101st and 82nd and the British 1st Airborne, drop into Holland to seize bridges across multiple rivers. XXX Corps, Montgomery's armored spearhead, races up a single highway to relieve them. The plan is to leap the Rhine at Arnhem, outflank the entire German defensive line, and drive into the Ruhr industrial heartland, ending the war by Christmas. It lasts 9 days. The British 1st Airborne lands at Arnhem, the northernmost bridge, and runs straight into 2 SS Panzer divisions refitting in the area. Units intelligence completely missed. The division is surrounded and cut off. XXX Corps cannot reach them. The single highway becomes a killing ground. By September 26th, it is over. Of the 10,000 men of the 1st Airborne Division who dropped into Arnhem, only 2,000 escaped back across the Rhine. 8,000 are killed, wounded, or captured. The bridge at Arnhem, the final objective, is never taken. Total Allied casualties from Market Garden reached 17,000 men, American, British, and Polish, for an operation that achieves none of its strategic objectives. The numbers tell the story. Montgomery demanded 1,200 tons of supplies per day indefinitely for a general offensive into Germany. What he received from Market Garden was roughly 1,000 tons per day for 2 weeks for a single operation. The result was catastrophic failure at Arnhem. But here's what did not happen. 3 American armies did not sit idle while Montgomery gambled everything on one plan that failed anyway. While Market Garden collapsed in Holland, the broad front strategy Montgomery dismissed as timid was working. Patton's Third Army, operating on reduced supplies, captured 37,000 German prisoners in Lorraine. Hodges's First Army liberated Luxembourg and pushed into Germany. Devers's Sixth Army Group cleared southern France. The broad front kept pressure on Germany across 400 miles of frontage. Hitler could not concentrate his reserves against a single thrust and could not rebuild his armies behind a quiet sector. The Allies advanced slowly and expensively, but relentlessly, and the command structure held. This was not a simple staff disagreement. Montgomery genuinely believed he should command all Allied ground forces. He genuinely believed political pressure from London would force Eisenhower to yield. He tried to use his prestige as Britain's most famous general to reorganize the Allied command structure in the middle of an active campaign. Eisenhower said no, backed by Marshal and ultimately backed by Churchill, who understood that preserving Montgomery's pride was not worth shattering the alliance. When Eisenhower offered the compromise, approving Market Garden while firmly maintaining the existing command structure, Montgomery was left with stark choice. He could accept it and remain in command, or he could resign and watch someone else take over 21st Army Group. The resignation letter he had already drafted went into a drawer and was never sent. After Market Garden failed, Churchill met privately with Field Marshal Brooke in London. Brooke later recorded the Prime Minister's words in his diary. Eisenhower had been right. Montgomery would have led Britain to the same failure. But with Patton's and Bradley's armies idle and furious, the Allies would have lost the coalition over a flawed plan. Eisenhower, for his part, never publicly criticized Montgomery over the September crisis. He never mentioned the resignation threat in official reports and never used it for political advantage. He protected Montgomery's reputation, preserved the coalition, and carried on with the war. That is coalition command. Not finding the perfect plan, but finding the plan that keeps the alliance intact while defeating the enemy. Years later, after the war, Eisenhower was asked about the crisis of September 1944 during an interview. His response, later published in his memoirs, went straight to the heart of the matter. Montgomery, he said, was careful, thorough, and methodical, but he never fully grasped that supreme command in a coalition is not about executing the perfect military idea. It is about holding the alliance together while destroying the enemy. In September 1944, Montgomery's perfect plan would have fractured Allied unity beyond repair. Eisenhower said he would rather take Berlin slowly with American and British armies side by side than race there alone, and arrive to find the coalition in ruins behind him. The final irony came at the end of the war. When Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, it was not the result of a single brilliant thrust to Berlin. It was because a dozen Allied armies, American, British, Canadian, Free French, Polish, ground Germany down on every front at the same time. Eisenhower's broad front strategy, criticized, mocked, and dismissed as timid, worked. Montgomery personally accepted the surrender of German forces in northern Germany, a proud moment and a fitting conclusion to his command. Eisenhower was elsewhere that day, coordinating the surrender of German forces across the entire Western Front, from the North Sea to the Alps, with every army, every sector, and every commander reporting to him. One man commanded an army, the other commanded the war. That is what the phone call of September 15th, 1944, truly decided. Not simply whether Montgomery received more supplies, but whether any subordinate commander, no matter how famous or politically connected, could threaten, negotiate, or resign his way into control. Eisenhower's answer was no, and that answer held the alliance together long enough to win the war. If this story revealed a side of World War II history you had never seen before, do me a favor. Hit the like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to WW2 War Files for more untold stories from the war that shaped everything. This is the history they don't teach. These are the moments that decided the world we live in.